Yo, what's going on, people? It's your boy Huncho, and this is Cases Season 1, Episode 8, the Wayne Freckleton case, aka Zeno from CRS.
Hey yo, it's a notorious brand. Huncho, CRS. One time again, now them set it off. See what it's called. Another burial, another life lost. Family and friends, them not stop from bar.
Wayne Freckleton, aged 25, more known by his alias Zeno, was a UK rapper out of North West London, that being Harlesden, but more specifically the Church End estate, or as you guys will know it more as Church Road. Korneh Freckleton, more known by his rap alias Nines, is Zeno's younger brother, and you might have even had Zeno's name used in a lot of his songs, as he opened a record label using his brother's name, and this would be somewhat a watermark for a lot of the songs that Nines and affiliated artists would have at the start of their music. Zeno would represent CRS, more known as Church Road Soldiers, and even though he would stick to that early 2000s rap sound, he would also dabble in a bit of Jamaican music, such as dancehall. Now for you guys that didn't know, Church Road is most known for their beef with other close by areas such as Stonebridge and South Kilburn, and we know Stonebridge is home to UK rapper K Coke and USG, and we know South Kilburn is home to UK rappers C Biz and ER. Now throughout this case, there is something what police would label tit-for-tat gangland murders, and we're not going to cover every single tit-for-tat attack, but we'll cover each relevant one by one, so it kind of paints a timeline for you because it does get a little bit confusing, but I will make it make sense for you. So, the case of Zeno would start all the way back in 2001. Now, at this moment in time, I can't clarify who the person is, but Trident believe that a friend of Zeno and his friend Shanker Anderson, more known by his rap alias Cash, had been shot in July of 2001. Here, the victim had survived, and the gunman was thought to be Mohamed Korneh, at this time only aged 16 or 17. He is originally from Croydon and was said to have been affiliated with Stonebridge members. Then, in January of 2002, Cash would go on to be shot in the face allegedly by Mohamed, but at this current time, I don't believe police have ever found who officially had committed the shooting. So, on the night of the 15th of December 2002, an anti-gun party called Unarmed Part 2 was held at the Tudor Rose nightclub in Southall. It was said that around 200 people had attended the event. The 2001 alleged shooter Mohamed Korneh and Stonebridge member Selorn Gbesemete had attended. CCTV would show that allegedly around 10 minutes past 2 in the morning, Zeno and Cash would enter the nightclub, and sometime later would approach Selorn. He'd be shot inside the club and would stagger outside before collapsing in an alleyway, and he would go on to die at the scene. Mohamed was shot in the head with a .38 revolver inside the club and was then taken to New Ealing Hospital, where he later died a few hours after he had been shot. A post-mortem examination was held and found that both men had died as a result of gunshot wounds. Police would then go on to launch a murder investigation, and 4 days later, after no arrest had been made, the police and the pair's family in mourning would speak out about the situation and make an appeal for people to come forward with information. DCI Richard Freeman of the Metropolitan Police would say at the time, the two victims of this double murder went to a nightclub held as a protest against guns, and themselves became the victims of London's gun culture. He would go on to say, one of the suspects is described as Afro-Caribbean, aged about 20, 5 foot 8 inches tall, and wearing a thick black leather jacket, and the second suspect is also described as Afro-Caribbean, but no further description is available, and it's believed that the two suspects were a part of a group of Afro-Caribbean men, aged in their 20s, who had left the club in a rush after the incident. On January the 9th, 2003, police would once again appeal for information surrounding the double murder, as still no arrests had been made, and they had hit a wall of silence because everyone who had attended the event wouldn't come forward to give police information about the shooting. So, the years following this, no arrests would have been made, and inquiries surrounding it would still be ongoing. After this, the case would be classed as unsolved and police would close the case. So in an unrelated incident but still classed as a tit-for-tat attack, on June the 19th, 2005, 3 men, aged 18 and 2 19-year-olds, had been shot, with one of the 19-year-olds fighting for his life at the scene. It would be around 9:50 PM that June night that Troy Robinson, the 19-year-old who had been fighting for his life, was killed as he sat on some steps with his friends on the Stonebridge estate. He was found by police officers with gunshot wounds to his chest, lying in Wybourne Way, while the 2 other men, brothers Darren and Craig Jackson, were hit in the legs. Troy was unfortunately pronounced dead on arrival at the Central Middlesex complex in Park Royal Hospital. Darren had discharged himself from hospital after receiving non-life-threatening injuries, and his brother Craig had remained in hospital for a few days later, where he remained in stable condition. He would go on to make a full recovery and be discharged from hospital a short time later. At this time, police believed that the shootings were random and the 3 hit were not specific targets. They believed the people responsible for Troy's death and his friend's injuries drove to Wybourne Way by car from Conduit Way and arrived at approximately 9:45 PM, parking in the road next to the steps that led up to James Dudson Court. Troy and a group of up to 18 people were gathered on the steps drinking soft drinks and smoking. DCI Scott Wilson of Operation Trident would say at the time, "We believe one or more of the men got out the car and fired shots towards James Dudson Court, which hit Troy and 2 of his friends. The group that fired the shots then left the scene in a vehicle at around 9:50 PM. Troy's death was a needless waste of life. He was a 19-year-old young man who had his whole life in front of him. Troy was with a group of about 18 people at the time of his murder. The shots could have hit any one of them or any member of the public. They just happened to hit him. I can only describe this as a reckless act of violence. We do not know how many men were in the car or their ages, but we do think they were all Afro-Caribbean as well as the victims. We're keeping an open mind regarding the motive, and an incident room has opened at West Hendon under DCI Scott Wilson of Operation Trident." Then, a few days later, on June the 29th, 2005, police would continue to appeal for witnesses. And exactly 1 month later, on the 29th of July 2005, police would come out and offer a reward of £20,000 for information leading to the identification, arrest and prosecution of the person or persons responsible for Troy's murder. It was reported at the time that police had continued to work closely with the community and members of the Trident Advisory Group, and Brent police were said to have increased patrols in the area even a month after to reassure residents. There's currently no report, but sometime after this appeal, police would go on and arrest 23-year-old Wayne Freckleton, aka Zeno, for Troy's murder, and they would go on to charge him. In their investigation, they believe that this was part of an ongoing tit-for-tat violence between 2 rival areas. The charges brought against him would be conspiracy to commit murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, and 2 counts of causing grievous bodily harm with intent. And on February the 21st, 2006, Zeno had appeared at the Old Bailey for a plea case management hearing and to set a date for trial. But the prosecution would announce on this day they were dropping the case for lack of evidence, and it was reported that only one eyewitness was willing to testify in court, and there were doubts about their reliability. So, Judge Paul Fock QC approved the decision of the Crown Prosecution Service to drop the charges. So, just over 2 years later, on the 25th of April 2008, a now 25-year-old Wayne Freckleton, aka Zeno, would be waiting for his cousin to have his haircut at Ike's Barbers in Acton Lane, Harlesden. Be around 1:30 PM, 2 men would enter the packed-out barbers and open fire on Zeno. 1 bullet would hit him in his arm, but the other had lodged into his brain, and unfortunately, he passed away. When police arrived at the scene, 9 people were present, and officers had gone on to arrest 2 men, who were later released on bail. I'm unsure if the 2 arrested were later on to be charged, but sometime in May, 2 26-year-old men, that being Jamal Smith and Richard Osborne, were arrested and charged with the murder of Zeno. They were remanded into custody, and they appeared at the Old Bailey via video link from Belmarsh Prison on the 11th of August 2008. At this hearing, they confirmed their names and pleaded not guilty to the charges brought against them, and Judge Stephen Kramer QC had ordered a trial date for the 19th of January 2009. Then, on the 29th of December 2008, a third man, Antoine Richards, would go on to be charged with Zeno's murder, and he was due to appear at Brent Magistrates Court the following day, that being the 30th of December 2008. There's currently no reports for that further court date, but it's more than likely here he would have pleaded not guilty and would have been put on trial with the other 2 for January of 2009. And it would be at some point between December of 2008 and April of 2009 that 2 men, being Marcus Siam, age 19, and Femi Ford, age 24, would go on to be charged with Zeno's murder. Within this time, Jamal Smith's charges would be changed from murder to 2 counts of assisting an offender, because now he was being accused of impeding the apprehension of Ford and Osborne between April 25th and May 2nd of 2008. There's currently no reports for Marcus Siam's first court date, but at that hearing, he would have pleaded not guilty and been put on trial with the others. On the 24th of April 2009, Femi Ford would make an appearance at the Old Bailey. Here he denied the charges of murder brought against him, and although the original date for trial was set for January of 2009, with it now being April, it had been moved to June 1st, 2009, and the trial was expected to last up to 6 weeks. I can't find any reports shots at this current time, but another man, Aaron Bernard, had allegedly waited outside to drive the alleged gunman away. Bernard was arrested and charged with the murder after police identified his number plate from CCTV images taken from a passing bus. But when he was arrested, police had made him an offer that if he agreed to testify against the gunman, then in return the charges brought against him for the Zeno case would get dropped, and instead he would admit to 2 counts of assisting an offender and had revealed all previous criminality, including supplying drugs, robbery, burglary, theft, assault, and possession of an offensive weapon. So, to round up, on June 1st, 2009, Marcus Siam, Antoine Richards, Femi Ford, and Richard Osborne would be going on trial for the murder of Wayne Freckleton, aka Zeno, and Jamal Smith would be going on trial for 2 counts of assisting an offender, and Aaron Bernard, who was the alleged getaway driver, would be testifying in court against his previous friends. Now, it might get a little bit confusing for some of you guys, but I'm going to try and make it as clear as I can. We're going to have to rewind a little bit. Now, if you guys have listened to K-Coke in the past, then you'll know that he's referenced a man by the name of Darren Mathoran, or as most of you will know him, Spyder.
Run, hide, better keep from the ends. Dumb guy, we can't reason again. Dumb lies got you leaving the pen. You're a snitch cause you're speaking to them.
In a revenge attack for a killing the previous year in 2004, on January the 13th, 2005, 4 men had shot and killed a man called Jamal Moore on Griffin Close in Willesden Green. Jamal and his friend Sean Sefferson had been celebrating at a family party close by. Sean had got into a taxi, which had then drove off. Then, at 11:30 PM, grainy CCTV footage recovered by police would show 4 hooded men walking into darkness towards the house. The 4 would see the taxi pass, and they would move off camera, continuing to walk towards the house. They had come in search for Sean, but had spotted Jamal and turned on him. He was with his girlfriend getting a case of beer from his car, and 3 guns had fired with a total of 16 shots ringing off, which papers would describe as peppering the Renault Megane. The CCTV footage would then show the men running away, with at least one of them still carrying the gun glinting in the streetlights. Although hit by 5 bullets, Jamal managed to dive away from the car and roll down a bank, followed by his uninjured girlfriend. Lying at the bottom of the bank dying, he had called 999 on his mobile phone, screaming that he needed an ambulance and that he'd been shot and that he was in a back garden. He went on to say, "Please, I'm dying. Please help." He's then heard naming one of the shooters. It was Rufus. Rufus shot me. A male voice is then heard on Jamal's side of the phone, saying that his breathing is becoming more difficult, and that's followed by his girlfriend breaking down, crying and screaming, "Please help him. You can't leave me, Jamal." Darren Mathoran, aka Spyder, had been the driver who had drove the 4 to the area and subsequently had drove them away after. After reading a description of the van he had used in a local newspaper, Spyder had drove it to East London to burn it and destroy fingerprint and DNA evidence. He had doused the vehicle with petrol and lit it, but the explosion had blew off his woolly hat and badly burned his legs. He went to hospital by cab with his legs poking out of a window to cool them off to dull the pain. Police had found Spyder's DNA on the hat, and they had identified Rufus, which was the nickname of Roberto Parchment. On the night of the murder, both men had left their mobile phones switched on, allowing police to place them at the scene. And after a 2-year investigation, Parchment and a 3rd man, Romain White, were found guilty of killing Jamal Moore, and Mathoran was convicted of conspiracy to murder. 2 other men, Sean Bennett and a professional footballer, Gavin Grant, who had played for Millwall, were cleared. So, why is this information relevant to Zeno's case? Well, after his conviction, Spyder had told police he was prepared to give information on gangland murders and details of his own lifetime of robbery, drug dealing, and gang-related violence. It was what the police had been hoping for, a chance to get an inside look into the world of these criminals who had been committing violence on the streets of London, and an insight to the workings of the gangs. Spyder was already serving a 6.5-year sentence imposed in 2006 for possessing a Mac-10. He was also said to have owned at least 3 other guns, such as a sawn-off shotgun, a small 22 caliber automatic pistol, and a 32 caliber cowboy gun. So in return for giving information to police, his 16-year sentence for the murder would go on to get reduced to 8, which meant he'd be out in 4 with a brand new identity, because the gun charges that were brought against him would have been dropped as he was cooperating with police. So we won't be covering all the cases, but one of the testimonies he gave to Trident officers was about the 2002 South Southall shooting. Here, he gave the name of the shooters as Wayne Freckleton and Shanker Anderson, aka Cash and Zeno. With Zeno getting shot and dying in April of 2008, as we previously spoken about, Cash, now aged 27 from Bristol, would then go on to be arrested by police with the information Spyder had given them, and he was charged with the double murders on the 18th of July 2008. He was due to appear at Ealing Magistrates Court the following day, on the 19th of July 2008. At that court hearing, he was then remanded until his next hearing on the 23rd of July 2008. There's no reports of that further hearing, but it would be on the 31st of October 2008, after denying 2 counts of murder. A trial date would be set by Judge Brian Barker QC for the 15th of April 2009. Cash was then remanded into custody until this date. So, in April of 2009, Shanker Anderson, aka Cash, would be going on trial after Spyder had given evidence against him and Zeno. And as we previously spoken about, it would be around the same time in April that the 5 men who had allegedly killed Zeno would have their trial date announced for June 2009. So allegedly, Zeno's killing was a revenge hit for the 2002 shooting at Mohamed Korneh and Selorn Gbesemete. So let's follow the first trial and go into depth as to what happened on the night of the double murder in December of 2002. So after the trial was postponed by 2 days, the trial of the 2002 shooting would take place on the 17th of April 2009. In court at the Old Bailey, it was heard that Shanker Anderson had moved to Bristol in 2004 after serving a prison sentence for a fray, and that he was convicted of supplying Class A drugs at Bristol Crown Court on December 14th, 2005, and was jailed for 4.5 years. It was told to the court that he allegedly gunned down the pair as part of a tit-for-tat battle between rival gangs, which we've previously spoken about. The court was then told briefly about the pair being found dead outside the nightclub after an event to campaign against gun violence, and that the original police investigation ran into a dead end after all the witnesses refused to identify the 2 gunmen. They were then told in 2007 that Supergrass Darren Mathoran, aka Spyder, had approached police while in prison. As part of this deal, the court were then told that he would give up information, as we previously spoken about the shooting, and here he insisted that on the night he was just an innocent partygoer, but he named the killers as Anderson, aka Cash, and Freckleton, aka Zeno, and jurors were then told that Zeno had since been shot and killed. Prosecutor Stephen Batten QC said, "It's common knowledge that people who offer to do what he did, known as grassers, do it because they end up with significantly lighter sentences. You have a man who led a thoroughly immoral and selfish life, ending up with a lighter sentence because he has helped solve crimes which may otherwise go unsolved. He may tell you that once he was caught and convicted, he has rethought the things that matter in life to him. It may be that he's now converted to a religious belief and has a motive to make amends." Mr. Batten told jurors that this is the first time he will give evidence under that bargain. The upshot is you must approach his evidence with enormous care. The court then heard a second witness had also come forward to identify the 2 gunmen following a re-investigation by the Met's Operation Trident team. Jurors were told that the double shooting may have its background in an attack on a friend of Anderson and Freckleton in July of 2001. With that victim surviving the shooting, it was thought that the gunman was Mohamed, then aged only 16 or 17, which we previously spoke about, and the prosecution also had brought up that Anderson had been shot in the cheek in January of 2002. On the night of Saturday, December 14th, 2002, CCTV had showed Zeno and Cash attending the Tudor Rose nightclub for the Unarmed Part 2 event. The prosecution would go on to say it's something of a tragic irony that this event was part of a campaign to stop young black men in the area going around with guns. There must have been a lot of people there who saw this. Some of them knew perfectly who was responsible for this shooting. Why is it being tried in 2009? The short and rather sad answer is that in 2003, when police investigated the shooting, they were unable to find any witnesses who were prepared to stand up in public and name any names. The guns disappeared, the killers scarpered, and didn't leave behind any fingerprints or DNA. Mr. Gbesemete of Stonebridge Park, northwest London, was shot in the club and had staggered outside before collapsing in an alleyway. Mr. Korneh of Croydon, South London, was shot in the head with a .38 revolver, and he was also armed, but his weapon was still in his waistband when he was found dead, the prosecution had told the court. The prosecution would then go on to say about Spyder, who was facing a long time in prison. He had a history of life in crime and earned his living dealing drugs. He offered to tell police about other significant crimes that he himself had committed, other significant crimes which he knew his associates had committed, and one other significant crime in which he had absolutely no involvement in whatsoever. Then, at a further court date, Spyder would come forward to give his evidence in court against Cash and Zeno. He said he had come forward to help police after being let down by his former friends while in prison, and that he turned his back on his life of crime because it was a dog-eat-dog world. He would go on to tell the court he witnessed the murder of 21-year-old Mohamed Korneh on the dance floor of the Tudor Rose nightclub in Southall, West London on December 15th, 2002. He said that he had fled the club and then found the second man, 21-year-old Selorn Gbesemete, and he had also been gunned down outside in the street. Spyder then gave the name of the gunman as Shanker Anderson, now aged 28, known as Cash, and Wayne Freckleton, known as Zeno, and he would go on to say that he knew Zeno and Cash by sight and went on to describe the victims and their group they was with as associates of his. He said there was tension as soon as the gunmen had entered because it was known there was trouble between the two sides. Spyder went on to explain the majority of the people in the club were from the Stonebridge estate. Because of what was going on, the beef that was going on, I didn't think they would turn up. They had their hands in their pockets and their jackets zipped up. Everyone knew there was tension going on at that point. He said that Cash then climbed the stairs and shot Mohamed, known as Shorty, from behind. Spyder added, Shorty dropped to the floor. After the first shot, there was a 2-second gap and Zeno started shooting. By that time, the whole dance floor went right to the back and Shorty was lying on the floor. Zeno was jumping back and forward. He fired 7 to 8 times. I was just staring. He said he went over to Mohamed as the gunmen fled and found him struggling to breathe. I was calling him and he was going, ah, ah, ah. Spyder then said he went outside and saw Mr. Gbesemete lying there. He went on to say there was lots of people around him and they were carrying him in. I could see that he was dead. In cross-examination, he admitted he'd been a drug dealer involved in fraud as well as violent crime, but he added, that's not the life I want to lead anymore, and the friends who I thought were my friends wasn't there for me when I needed them. It's a dog-eat-dog world, innit? And you've got to look after number one. He would go on to say that he wouldn't have made the evidence up to get a lighter sentence or because he did not like the alleged gunman, going on to tell the court, there's a lot of people I don't like, but that wouldn't be enough for me to say they'd done something that they hadn't done. It was open knowledge. They were actually telling people they did it. At a further court date, Cash would go on to tell the court that he was only at the nightclub to watch Dizzy Rascal perform. He said he was facing the stage at Tudor Rose nightclub in Southall, West London, when he heard gunfire breaking out. Jurors were then told that Mohamed was shot by the two gunmen on the dance floor about 30 minutes into the performance. Then, Selorn was shot near the entrance to the club as the killers had fled, it was claimed. Giving evidence from the witness box, Cash had admitted he was at the Tudor Rose on the night of the murders, and he had told the court he knew dozens of people at the event. He claimed he was a talented DJ called Cash or Cash Money and had uploaded one of his songs onto YouTube. Cash would then go on to tell the court that he was influenced by 50 Cent and Mavado, adding, I class myself as talented when it comes to music. They were then told about Cash getting shot in the cheek in January of 2002, and it was heard that Mohamed had allegedly confessed to his girlfriend that he had shot Cash. But Cash said he had no idea who shot him and denied he was after revenge. He said he last saw Mohamed in the club standing near the fire exit, adding, I was talking to a lot of people. I was by the bottom of the stage. I was facing the stage when the gunfire went off. He would go on to tell jurors, I'm not a gunman. I'm none of that. I might smoke a little drugs. I make music. I'm not running up and down with a gun trying to kill. Then, on the 7th of May 2009, an Old Bailey jury would clear Cash of both murder charges after they had rejected the testimony of Spyder. And this left detectives shocked, and the Crown lawyers were to go into talks about whether to use Spyder for further trials. On a quick side note, they did. It was said that Cash, wearing a dark suit and a blue tie, nodded as the jury returned the not guilty verdicts on the 2 counts of murder. So, after getting cleared of the double murders, Cash would go on to walk free, and technically, this would also clear Zeno's name. So, it would be the following month, on June 1st, 2009, that Zeno's murder trial would start. And it was heard in court that Zeno was gunned down for the revenge of the 2002 nightclub shooting. It was heard that Wayne Freckleton, aged 25, was shot as he waited for his cousin to have his haircut in Harlesden, North West London. As we previously explained, one bullet had hit him in his arm and the other had lodged in his brain and killed him, and it was later found they had wraps of crack and heroin hidden in his foreskin of his penis. John McGuinness QC prosecuting had told jurors that Mr. Freckleton was a suspect in a double shooting in Southall, West London. Mohamed Korneh and Selorn Gbesemete were both shot dead in December of 2002, he had told the court. Mr. McGuinness said, Freckleton was murdered as payback for that widely held belief that he had many years earlier killed Mr. Korneh and Mr. Gbesemete. The prosecution say Mr. Freckleton's death resulted out of gang rivalry. He said that Femi Ford had been called on by Antoine Richards, who had been waiting in the barber shop for Zeno to turn up, and Marcus Siam and Ford had rang accomplice Richard Osborne. After the shooting, Ford and Osborne fled to a Toyota Yaris which sped them away, and it was heard in court that Jamal Smith allegedly drove from his home in Colchester to collect Osborne and Ford and take them to Birmingham. At a further court date, it was heard that terrified customers had fled for their lives after the gunman had killed Zeno. One witness who gave evidence from behind a screen in Court 6 at the Old Bailey had told jurors he was sitting on a wall outside of the shop and could sense something was about to happen when he saw the two men walk past him. He had told the court his suspicions were heightened by the heavy clothes the duo was wearing on the hot day. He said, "They were walking so fast that right away I was saying to myself, these guys are going to do something." The first one had his hands in his pocket and the second one had his hand on his waist. He later said, "The taller one looked at me and his face was screwed up in a vicious way." When asked what happened next, the witness had said, "I jumped off the wall as I knew it was a gunshot. Then I hear bang bang, two more." Another witness described how he saw two men go into the shop just before the shooting who appeared to be hyped up. Najette Richards, who was at the bus stop opposite, said, "I heard one or two shots. Following that, I heard screaming and shouting." When asked what she did after the shooting, Mrs. Richards said, "I was concerned for my safety. I moved away from the bus stop. I tried to keep as quiet as I could." At a further court date, Aaron Bernard, who we previously spoke about was willing to give up information for immunity from this case, had told the court that he was the getaway driver who helped two gunmen flee the scene of the barbershop murder and told the jurors how one of them confessed to the killing. Bernard claims that Ford had asked him to give him a lift to Ike's barbershop in Acton Lane, Harlesden, because Osborne needed to pick up some money. But when the pair had ran back and told him to drive, they admitted that they had killed Mr. Freckleton, nicknamed Zeno. Bernard said he met Ford a few days later and asked him to explain himself. He then went on to tell the jury, "I said to him, 'You lot take the piss. How could you do that to me?' He said he only phoned me because he couldn't get anybody else to drive. He said when he heard Zeno was at Ike's, he didn't want to miss his chance." Bernard said he asked how Ford knew the victim was at the barber shop and was told that Marcus Siam had phoned him. It was then heard that Ford then gave the details of the shooting at 1:30 p.m. on April the 25th of 2008. He would go on to say, when he got there, he saw Zeno in the middle of the shop. He said Richie, talking about Richard Osborne, had fired the first shot but missed and his gun stuck. Talking about Ford, he said he fired two shots and he saw he hit Zeno in the head and he had ran. It was then heard that around a month later, Mr. Ford had called Mr. Bernard for a lift to the Queensway shopping centre in Bayswater. He went on to say, he then said, which I took as a subliminal threat to me, "If I hear that anybody is talking to the police, I'm going to get them." At a further court date, it was heard that Richard Osborne was baffled as to why he was being named as a suspect. He would go on to tell the court that he'd only found out about the murder of Zeno when his mother had told him about it, and he also claimed that he'd never been to the scene at Ike's barbershop in Acton Lane, Harlesden. But the court would go on to be told that his former friend turned prosecution witness Aaron Bernard had named him as responsible. It was originally in his police interview that Osborne had said that he had never been to Ike's barbershop and he didn't even know where it was. He added, "You lot have got me on some flippin' mad shit. I'm just confused. I think like everything that happens, they seem to call my name. Why me? These people don't like me. They just want to get rid of me or want to kill me." He had claimed he was blamed for everything after he went to jail in 2005. He said, "I'm baffled. I'm finding out who killed my man. They're mentioning Richie. Everything that happens, it's Richie. My whole life now. I hear this guy's got shot and everybody's calling my name. My mum told me how embarrassing that must feel. I even told my probation officer. She said I must come and hand myself into you. I don't know what the heck's going on. I might have a little temper. You think I've got time to do this? If I did this, I couldn't sleep at night. That's what you don't understand." At a further court date, it was heard that Antoine Richards was accused of calling on the murder of Zeno after he had told the jury he was at the scene waiting for a friend to get his haircut. And as we previously spoken about, the court would hear that Antoine Richards allegedly waited at Ike's Barbers in Harlesden for the target Zeno to arrive. It was then claimed that he made a series of calls to the killers before they arrived at the shop. He would go on to admit being at the barber's shop, but told the Old Bailey he was waiting for Joshua Wilkins to get a trim. He told jurors he had never seen or heard of Zeno until after he had been arrested over the shooting. Before he began his evidence, Marcus Siam was cleared of murder by direction of Judge the Recorder of London, Peter Beaumont QC, who ruled he had no case to answer at the case of the prosecution case. Richard said he and his close friend Joshua Wilkins had gone to Ike's as they were both going to a party the following day. He went on to say, "When I went to his house, he commented on how my hair looked, and after a while, he decided he was going to go to the barber's." The prosecution would say CCTV images taken from Acton Lane at around 12:45 PM showed him going to buy a bag of Skittle Sweet from a nearby shop as he waited for Mr. Wilkins. It was then heard that the pair had sat on a bench inside the barber's waiting for a chair to become free. Mr. Wilkins used Richard's phone to make a couple of calls, the prosecution said. His barrister, Andrew Hall QC, asked if he ever seen Wayne Freckleton in the flesh before. Richards replied, "No, I hadn't." The barrister would go on to ask, "Had you ever heard the name before?" And Richards would go on to reply, "No," but he admitted knowing the nickname Zeno. Richards said he spoke to his friend and cousin Siam inside the barber's who identified Zeno. He would go on to say, "He asked me, who's that talking loudly in the background? At the time, I didn't know it was Zeno, but now I know it was Zeno. I said, it's just some guy cracking a joke with the barber, and Josh said to me, that's Zeno." Siam said that Freckleton was known for wearing nice jewellery. The court then heard that following this conversation, Siam was involved in a series of calls with Ford and Osborne, who the prosecution are alleging to be the gunmen. According to Richards, Siam would call him back asking who Zeno was with, and then he replied, "I was puzzled why he wanted to know." He went on to say, Siam told him he was thinking of coming to the shop to talk to Zeno. Richards continued, "It never sounded like anything bad was going to happen. To me, it sounded like Marcus knew Wayne Freckleton. If I thought something bad was going to happen, I would have left." He was then asked what he was doing in the 20 minutes before the gunmen had turned up to the shop, and he added, "I was sitting in the barber's waiting for Joshua to get his haircut." Asked about the double murder which Zeno had allegedly been involved in, Richards had told the court that he was aged 11 at the time of the double killing. The prosecution went on to ask, "Had you heard anything about those murders?" with him replying, "No, I hadn't." Then, on the 13th of July 2009, Femi Ford and Richard Osborne were found guilty of Zeno's murder. On this day, Femi Ford was sentenced to life imprisonment and to serve a minimum of 30 years before he was eligible for parole. And on this day, Richard Osborne, for an unknown reason, was to be sentenced on the 15th of July 2009. On this day, we would see that Antoine Richards was cleared of murder, and as we previously spoken about, Marcus Siam was cleared at an earlier date. Jamal Smith was also cleared of assisting an offender. Sentencing Ford, Judge Peter Beaumont QC said, "You've played very high stakes in this trial and you have lost. Now you've got to pay the price. You took a man's life by shooting him quite deliberately, having sought him out when the news reached you he was in London. For that, there's only one sentence I can pass, and that is life imprisonment." The getaway driver who had testified against his former friends had been cleared of the charges in the Zeno case, and he was sentenced to just 18 months, but would get out in August of 2009 after serving time on remand. He was found guilty on 2 counts of assisting an offender and had revealed all previous criminality, including supplying drugs, robbery, burglary, theft, assault, and possession of an offensive weapon. Then, on the 15th of July 2009, Richard Osborne was also sentenced to life imprisonment and was to serve a minimum of 30 years behind bars. Passing the same sentence on Osborne, Judge Peter Beaumont QC said, "I can find no reason for distinguishing your part in the event which led to the death of Wayne Freckleton from those that applied to Femi Ford. Both of you set out to find and then kill Wayne Freckleton, which you did." And that is the Wayne Freckleton case, aka Zeno from CRS. And I just want to take this time out just to say rest in peace to Zeno and my condolences with his family at this current time. Now, throughout this case, the tit-for-tat shootings would still continue to go on, with Shanker Anderson, aka Cash, actually going on to get jailed for life for a further shooting that had happened in Bristol when him and a gang member had shot it out after Carnival and he hit an innocent bystander. And the innocent bystander who had actually got hit and unfortunately had passed away in that Bristol shooting was actually Maya Jama's boyfriend. But if you like this series, give the video a thumbs up. Let me know what you guys think of this in the comment section below. And if you want the latest drill, street and music news out of the UK, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. It's been your boy Huncho, and I'm out.